it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and we're going to do a little sew along for the Tessa bag. We're going to start with the interfacing, the ring tabs, the magnetic snap on the pocket, and the front pocket itself.
You'll find the measurements for all these pieces in your pattern instructions. And don't rub because it moves the interfacing and it ends up causing wrinkles or falling off your fabric. Let's just put it on here. I like face down because then I don't have a chance of it sticking to my iron. And then after I do this side when it's stuck on there, and I go very carefully to the edges because I don't want this messing up my iron. This is my lining. Now with this one, it's a funny kind of a lightweight canvas, and it's going to take a lot of work to get those wrinkles out, but I usually try a little bit. It's rather stiff fabric. And then I shall put the Fusible Fleece on top of it. Just press, no rubbing. So this is my lining for my pocket. And I didn't use Fusible Fleece on this one. I just used Shape Flex because I don't want it too bulky. I don't want my pocket to be bulky. But this is a nice feel to it just with this weight. So here we have our ring tab piece, and we're going to iron it first by folding it half long ways and pressing it, and then unfolding it and folding the edges into that crease we just made. And then later we're going to cut it in half. And after we cut it in half, then we can get it top stitched. So now we can top stitch our ring tabs, and my favorite foot for doing this is the stitch in the ditch foot. I move my needle to the far left, and the guide goes along the edge and gives me a perfect 1/8 of an inch stitching line. It makes it really uniform looking. Now we can put the D-rings on the ring tabs. Just slide one on, fold the tab in half, secure the end. You can baste it. You might want to use double-sided tape or wonder clips. And if you have a fabric that's too heavy, there's another way we should do this instead of this way. This is lighter cotton fabric. Now let's do the pocket flap next. I'm going to put a magnetic snap in it, so we have to measure. Make sure we find out where the center is and where our seam allowance is. I use 1/2 inch for seam allowances, and then add on maybe another 1/2 inch and put your snap there. Now we're very carefully going to measure again. It always pays to measure twice. And I see we've got our 1 inch still, and we can use the little washer from the magnetic snap as a template, and I just fill in the holes with some pen or felt or something just to mark it so I know where I'm supposed to stick the holes for the prongs of the magnetic snap. And if you stick a hole in, stick a really small hole in just to start. It's easier to make a hole bigger, but it's not easy to make it smaller if it's too big. Now you can see I've poked the holes through to the other side, so now I can stick the prongs of the magnetic snap through. Now I'd like to reinforce this because it worries me that those little pokey things are sticking out and rubbing against the fabric. So I'm going to get a piece of Peltex, and I'm going to cut the same kind of holes in it, just like the template of the magnetic snap. And I'm going to put those on top of the prongs that are sticking out. Now let's just push the prongs into the middle, into the center. I don't like them spread apart. I like them on top of each other almost, and I press them down quite hard. Now, there you have that's attached, but just because I'm a bit crazy, I like to make sure that it's really covered by sticking another piece of interfacing on top of it. This one's an iron-on one, so I just press it down, but it'll stop the rubbing from happening. And there you have it, finished. So now let's sew together the two pieces, the outer and the inner, of our pocket flap, and make sure that the right sides are together. And we'll leave a little gap at the top so that we can have a space to turn it. And we've already zigzagged the edges before, so they won't fray. Now I just clip the corners off and cut the seam allowances down so I don't have so much bulk. Next we're going to turn it inside out, and I love poking those little corners out with something sharp and making it nice and sharp, and then we can press it all. Do make sure that what you use to poke the corners out isn't too sharp that it's going to stick a hole in your corner, especially considering the corner was cut down.
And there you have it. It's ready to top stitch. Now again, I'm going to use my favorite sewing machine foot. It's the stitch in the ditch foot, and I make sure that my needle position is to the left so that I can follow along the edge of the pocket flap. Now you can see I've top stitched all around, including closing the gap where I turned the pocket flap. If you find your fabric's too heavy, you should cut all your seam allowances down by half, but then you'll have to zigzag it again so it doesn't fray and it stays compact. These are my two pieces, the outer and the inner piece for the pocket. And if you just wanted a patch pocket on the front of your Tessa bag, you just sew around the edge and leave a gap at the bottom for turning again. We are going to stick the snap on the bottom pocket piece here so it matches up with the top pocket flap. So to start with, let's measure where this snap is supposed to go. It doesn't matter if your pattern piece doesn't have markings on it, we just have to make the top flap match up with the bottom pocket. I like to place the bottom pocket piece on top of the pocket flap and measure all the way across to make sure it's all uniform, like 2 inches across all the way, or 1.5 inches across all the way, just to make sure it's level. Then I flip it over and I mark where the pocket flap piece ends. And I put a pin in it so I can see it on the right side. Next I measure how far it is from the point of my pocket to the center of the magnetic snap. And then I transfer that measurement over onto my pocket piece, where the point of the pocket is to the middle of the magnetic snap. And I put a pin in there to mark it. Then I flip it over and mark. That's where the center of my magnetic snap is going to be. So let's mark where these little holes are going to be. And we'll pick out a little tiny hole so that, remember, you can't make it smaller, but you can make it bigger. And this will be so that the prongs fit in again. Now we'll just push the prongs of the other half through these holes. Might have to work on it a little bit. There, now next we get the Peltex and a couple of pieces of Shape Flex. We'll start with the Peltex and we'll draw the holes for the prongs to go through. Poke them through carefully. And we'll push those on the prongs. Next comes the little washer, and we'll push that on. And then we'll push down the sides of the prongs. And I like pushing them so they face in. Now I'll just fuse on a couple of layers of Shape Flex. Now let's sew our lining onto our pocket piece, and we'll make sure we have the right sides together. Now just the same as with the pocket flap, we're going to sew around but leave a little opening at the bottom so that we can turn this inside out afterwards. Now you can see here I've turned it inside out, I've poked out the corners, and I've pressed it. I'm not going to top stitch it yet because I'm going to use the top stitching to attach it to the bag front. So that's the end of part 1 of the Tessa Bag Sew Along. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and like, and stay in touch so you can see part 2.